From the very first moment I heard the name Atlantis, something inside me awakened, an ancient whisper, almost forgotten, echoing through the deepest layers of humanity's collective memory. It was as if that word carried a secret the world had tried to bury, but that still insists on surfacing. Today, I decided to dive deep into this legend, not just as a researcher, but as someone who feels they may have once been there. Imagine a civilization so advanced it made the pyramids look like mere toys. Imagine streets of Orahalcum gleaming under the sun, navigable canals connecting colossal temples, and towers that touch the sky. Now imagine it all vanishing, not over centuries, but in a single night, disappearing as if it had never existed. The question that haunts me is, did this really happen? And if it did, why? Most importantly, where did the survivors go? Plato was the first to document this story. In the dialogues of Timaeus and Critias, he spoke of a land beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, a place inhabited by people of divine origin, endowed with wisdom, power, and ambition. But as they grew in arrogance, they defied the gods and were punished. All of this might sound like a Greek myth, but what if it's not? All around the world, there are remnants of something that doesn't fit into the conventional timeline. Submerged megalithic ruins in Japan, Cyclopean structures on the floor of the Atlantic Ocean, pyramids in the Americas guarding forgotten technologies. The coincidences are too many. Ancient maps reveal lands that shouldn't exist. Legends of sunken continents echo across cultures that never met each other. It's as if all these stories are pieces of the same puzzle. But there's something even more unsettling. In many of these accounts, there's a connection to the sky, to stars, to gods who came from above. Could these entities have been visitors? Could they have been the true founders of Atlantis? If so, Atlantis didn't just fall into the sea. It fell from the sky, and maybe, just maybe, it's still waiting to be rediscovered. Today, I invite you to embark with me on this journey. Together, we'll explore 8 chapters of revelations, speculations, and chilling discoveries. Each step deeper, each dive darker, and more revealing, because maybe, deep down, you feel that you have been there, that something inside you still remembers Atlantis. Take a deep breath. The dive begins now. The first time I read Plato's accounts of Atlantis, I couldn't treat them as mere allegories. There was something there, a detail in the words, a vibration in the text, that felt more like a testimony than an invention. He wasn't describing an abstract idea. He was speaking of a concrete land, with exact measurements, geographical location, and the genealogy of its kings. It wasn't just philosophy, it was a map, a memory. According to Plato, this gigantic island existed beyond the Pillars of Hercules, now the Strait of Gibraltar, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It was larger than Libya and Asia combined, an empire with colossal armies, unbeatable navies, and cities surrounded by concentric walls that shone like mirrors. And most astonishingly, this civilization existed 9,000 years before Plato's time, approximately 11,500 years ago, right at the end of the last ice age. A coincidence? But the question that follows me is, where did Plato get this story? He claimed the information came from an Egyptian sage, passed on to the Athenian lawmaker Solon, who in turn shared it with his relative Dropides, and eventually to Critias, and finally to Plato himself. A direct line of oral tradition, a memory preserved through centuries. And the Egyptians, as we know, were obsessed with preserving the past. If Plato lied, he was incredibly specific. He detailed Atlantis' political structure, its economy, its religion, even its social problems. He described how the divine lineage of the Atlanteans eventually corrupted, becoming more human, more greedy, more vulnerable, until one day, punishment struck, and Atlantis was swallowed by the sea. But there's an even more intriguing point. At no moment does Plato say the story is a metaphor. On the contrary, he insists on the truth of the facts. He says that the Greeks forgot their true past after multiple cataclysms, that there were civilizations before ours, that myths are distorted memories of a real past. This, for me, changes everything, because if Atlantis was real, and not just symbolic, then humanity's history must be rewritten. It means there were advanced civilizations even before the invention of agriculture. It means our understanding of time, of social evolution, of ancient technologies is completely wrong. And this is where the mystery deepens. Because after Plato, something strange happened. For centuries, his story was ignored, ridiculed, or reinterpreted as pure fiction. But why? What was so dangerous about the idea that an advanced civilization might have existed in the past? What secrets were being protected? Let's dive deeper. Let's investigate the physical clues that might confirm Plato's account, analyze other cultures that speak of sunken lands, explore the possibility of extraterrestrial influences, because where there's smoke, there's fire, and Atlantis might be much more than a myth. It might be a real echo of an empire that fell from the sky, and that may soon rise again from the shadows of time. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the following scene. A seasoned diver descends to the ocean floor. Driven only by curiosity and an old legend, he ignores the biting cold, the absolute darkness, and the crushing pressure on his body. What guides him is an image, a lost city. Suddenly, among rocks and corals, he sees steps, yes, steps carved in stone, forming a kind of staircase that seems to lead nowhere, or perhaps to a forgotten past. This is not just a scene from fiction. It's what many explorers report when visiting places like Yonaguni in Japan. The ruins of Yonaguni have puzzled archaeologists and researchers since their discovery in 1986. Located just off the coast of the Japanese island of the same name, these underwater formations feature right angles, platforms, columns, and what seem to be corridors, stairs, and even a truncated pyramid. The debate is fierce. Are they natural formations, or the construction of a long-lost civilization? What fascinates me the most is not the definitive answer, but the possibility, the idea that something so monumental was indeed built, and then swallowed by the sea. And Yonaguni is just the beginning. In the Bahama archipelago, near Bimini Island, there's another structure that stirs the imagination, the so-called Bimini Road, discovered in 1968. It's a formation of limestone blocks that appear perfectly aligned, as if forming a submerged road or wall. The resemblance to human engineering is unsettling. Why would these stones be there, aligned in geometric patterns, right in the middle of the ocean? Who placed them there, and why? The world is full of such anomalies. In the Gulf of Comet, India, marine archaeologists discovered in 2001 the remains of a submerged city, with structures dating back over 9,000 years. That's right, 9,000 years, long before Egyptian civilization, even before Sumer. Considered the cradle of civilization, these ruins seem to show remnants of walls, canals, and building foundations, all 40 meters deep. How could something so ancient have been built there? And more importantly, how did it become submerged? These discoveries challenge the official chronology of human history. According to school textbooks, agriculture began about 10,000 years ago, and the first cities emerged a few millennia later. But what if there is material evidence that contradicts this narrative? What if organized civilizations existed far earlier than history traditionally accepts? Civilizations that mastered engineering, mathematics, navigation, and that were wiped out by a global cataclysm. The cataclysm, by the way, is a recurring element. Science already recognizes that around 11,600 years ago, precisely when Plato places the fall of Atlantis, the planet underwent a drastic climatic shift. The end of the last ice age triggered abrupt rises in sea levels, completely altering Earth's geography. Coastal cities could have been submerged, entire peoples obliterated, written records destroyed, and what would remain? Only myths, only legends told around campfires by survivors trying to keep alive the memory of a fallen world. It's not just the ruins that speak, it's the maps themselves. The Piri-Reis map, dated 1513, for instance, shows Antarctica with astonishing accuracy, without the ice that now covers it. How could that be possible? Official cartography of Antarctica was only possible with modern technologies like satellites. Yet there it is, drawn over 500 years ago. And what's more, the map cites sources that were themselves much older, perhaps millennia old. Could this be an echo of Atlantean wisdom, passed down through generations until it was finally recorded on paper? Amidst all this, science remains cautious. It speaks of geological coincidences, natural formations, mistaken interpretations, and I understand that caution, rigor is necessary. But there's a fine line between skepticism and denial. When multiple cultures in different parts of the world tell of a sunken civilization, when we have ruins that don't fit into conventional narratives, when data keeps accumulating, it is no longer wise to ignore. It is time to investigate seriously. Atlantis may not be exactly as Plato described. It may not be precisely where we expect, but the idea of an advanced people who suddenly disappeared is supported by more than one piece of physical evidence. Perhaps the ruins are out there, waiting for humanity to open its eyes, waiting for the veil of academic arrogance to be lifted, and for us to finally accept we are not the first, there were others before us, and they left us clues. Let's follow those clues. Let's listen to what other cultures have to say. Let's look up to the skies and try to understand why so many legends link the Atlanteans to the stars. And maybe, just maybe, we will begin to redraw the map of a world that fell from the sky to the sea, and from the sea into oblivion. There's a question that keeps hammering in my mind every time I study Atlantis. Where did they come from? I'm not just talking about geographical origins. I'm talking about cosmic origins, because the more I investigate, the more I realize that the mystery of Atlantis is not just buried under the waters. It might also be scattered among the stars. Various ancient accounts, myths, and traditions from ancestral cultures speak of gods who descended from the sky, beings of light, bearers of wisdom, who taught humans agriculture, mathematics, astronomy, writing, and architecture. Different names in distant languages: Anunnaki, Viracocha, Quetzalcoatl, Osiris, but all with a common feature: they were not of this world. And what if these beings weren't just myths? What if they were visitors from other parts of the cosmos, who interacted with humanity in its early days? If they influenced multiple ancient cultures, it's not absurd to think that a civilization like Atlantis could have been directly founded by them. Let's look at Sumerian mythology. The Anunnaki, for example, were gods who came from another planet. According to clay tablets deciphered by scholars like Zechariah Sitchin, they allegedly created humans as workers, but also passed on knowledge, a powerful, advanced race that mastered science, genetic engineering, and space travel. Now, consider Atlantis, a people with highly developed technology, crystal energy, aerial vehicles, and mastery over the forces of nature. Coincidence? There's also the pre-Columbian civilizations. The Mayans spoke of Kukulkan, a feathered serpent, god who descended from the skies and brought wisdom. The Aztecs worshipped Quetzalcoatl, another sky deity. The Incas revered Viracocha, who came from the sea, but also from above, teaching the Andean peoples the principles of civilization. And these weren't ethereal beings. They were described in detail: unusual appearances, radiant clothing, powerful voices. In many accounts, they arrived and departed in flying objects that today we would easily associate with spacecraft. Even the Dogon people of Mali, in Africa, claim their ancestors received teachings from the Namos, aquatic beings from the star Sirius. The Dogons, astonishingly, had precise knowledge of the Sirius star system long before modern astronomy confirmed it. How? Coincidence or legacy? Now, connect the dots. If beings from other worlds were here and shared knowledge with ancient humans, it's not absurd to imagine that one of these encounters resulted in the founding of an advanced colony, Atlantis. Maybe Atlantis was an experiment, an outpost, a bridge between worlds, a convergence center between what we are and what we were invited to become. Plato said the Atlanteans were descendants of gods and humans, half divine, half terrestrial. This mixing of blood might not be merely symbolic, it could have been literal, and more, or a halcyon. The legendary metal present in Atlantis' streets and temples was described as glowing like fire, a material that, even today, no one has been able to replicate. Could it have been extraterrestrial technology or a form of channeled energy? And Atlantis' destruction, couldn't it have been a planned ending? Perhaps the gods decided to terminate the experiment, or maybe the Atlanteans crossed an ethical, moral, or energetic threshold that destabilized the planet. Many accounts suggest the fall of Atlantis involved a great war, powerful weapons, climatic disturbances, and an energetic collapse, something so destructive it echoed in the memories of peoples for millennia. Another possibility is that the Atlanteans themselves weren't destroyed, but evacuated, taken away. If they came from the sky, they could simply have returned, and the few who remained, or survived, spread around the world, passing down fragments of the ancient Atlantean knowledge to Earth's civilizations. They would have been the founders of ancient civilizations, the architects of the pyramids, the spiritual guides. When we look at Atlantis through this cosmic lens, everything changes. The story is no longer just about humanity's past. It becomes about its future. Because if we are right, if Atlantis was truly a bridge between worlds, then maybe the key to understanding who we are lies not only beneath the waters, but also above the clouds. And maybe, just maybe, those same entities will decide to visit us again, or remind us of who we truly are. Let's dive even deeper into this possibility. Let's investigate the symbols, technologies, and hidden messages that may have survived through time. Because perhaps, just perhaps, Atlantis never truly disappeared. Perhaps it merely shifted frequency, and it's waiting for us to be ready to see it once again. What fascinates me most about Atlantis is not just the fact that it disappeared, but what it is said to have been while it existed: a center of knowledge, an empire built upon a science that, even millennia later, we are only beginning to understand. And the question that haunts me is, what kind of technology was it? What kind of energy powered massive structures, illuminated entire cities without wires, enabled long-distance communication, and perhaps even manipulated space and time? We are not talking about furnaces, gears, or steam. We are talking about something subtler, more refined, and therefore more powerful. Many alternative sources suggest that the Atlanteans mastered crystalline energy. Giant crystals, positioned in geometric grids beneath the earth and sea, could capture, amplify, and distribute pure energy, drawn from the earth and the cosmos. The ancients knew what they were doing. They understood that crystals are not merely beautiful stones. They are structures of memory and vibration, natural resonators. Imagine an entire civilization operating based on this kind of wisdom. But crystals were only part of it. Another key aspect was the concept of sound and frequency. Various ancient traditions, Egyptian, Vedic, Tibetan, speak of using sound to move objects, heal the body, and open dimensional portals. What if the Atlanteans had perfected this art? What if they used acoustic chambers, calibrated with specific frequencies, to levitate stones, energize bodies, and reprogram the mental field? This is not fantasy. Today's science already admits that certain sound frequencies have measurable effects on matter. There are also indications that the Atlanteans knew principles of anti-gravity. Numerous accounts describe flying vehicles, often portrayed as discs or teardrop-shaped ships, capable of floating without visible propulsion. These vessels, called velaxi in some traditions, were used both for transportation and warfare. They allegedly harnessed the Earth's magnetic field for propulsion, or, as some theorists propose, operated by inverting gravity itself, manipulating the very fabric of reality. And what about Atlantean architecture? According to Plato, the main city was composed of concentric rings of land and water, connected by bridges and tunnels. But it wasn't just beautiful, it was functional. The layout of structures respected sacred geometric patterns, the golden ratio, Platonic solids, and the Fibonacci spiral. This wasn't mere aesthetics, it was applied science. They knew that certain shapes amplify energy, create vibrational harmony, and elevate the consciousness of those inhabiting that space. Today, bioenergetic architects and researchers of sacred geometry are beginning to rediscover these principles. But all this advanced technology was not limited to the physical world. The Atlanteans are said to have developed an inner science, as well, a kind of soul engineering. Records indicate that they used crystals and frequencies to expand consciousness, heal energetic diseases, restore emotional balance, and even access other dimensions. The Temple of Poseidon, for example, is said to have had a crystal dome where master priests could enter deep trances and receive information directly from higher realms, guiding the empire's decisions. And if all this sounds hard to believe, consider this. How many modern technologies were deemed impossible just 100 years ago? Airplanes, the internet, space travel. Now imagine 1,000 years into the future. Now imagine a civilization that was already millennia ahead of us and vanished. What happened to that technology? Where did it go? Was it destroyed, hidden? Did fragments survive in obelisks, pyramids, Nazca lines, or the unexplained artifacts found at excavation sites around the world? Perhaps it lies dormant, waiting to be rediscovered, or perhaps it is being used in secret by groups who inherited this knowledge and decided to keep it from the public. The truth is that this science of the ancients, this spiritual and energetic technology, may be the key not only to understanding Atlantis, but to transforming our future. Because if they once lived in harmony with the planet, the cosmos, and the spirit, maybe we can too. Maybe Atlantis didn't entirely disappear. Maybe it is simply waiting for us to awaken enough to find it again. Let's explore the clues left behind in this hidden legacy, the symbols, the codes, the messages carved in stone and energy that have crossed millennia in silence, waiting for us to be ready to listen. The story of Atlantis, as beautiful and fascinating as it is also tragic. At the height of its glory, when its temples shone like suns, its towers pierced the clouds, and its sages understood the harmony between spirit and matter. It vanished in a single night, in a single breath of the planet, and all that remained was silence. But what really happened? How could such a powerful empire fall so abruptly? The versions are many, but they all converge on one thing: the fall was provoked. Plato says that the Atlanteans had strayed from their divine essence, corrupted by power, ego, and the thirst for domination. They defied universal laws and were punished. But was this punishment purely metaphysical? Or is there more to the story? Alternative theories point to even more dramatic and perhaps more real scenarios. One of them speaks of an energetic collapse. According to this view, Atlantis' crystals, used to capture and distribute cosmic energy, were irresponsibly manipulated. Some priests or internal factions began to use these technologies for mind control, genetic transmutation experiments, and climate manipulation. The balance was broken. The planet's crystalline grid, with Atlantis at its center, collapsed. The result: chain earthquakes, colossal tsunamis, dimensional rifts. Reality itself was fractured. Other hypotheses speak of a war between two factions within the empire: the Sons of Light, who wanted to preserve knowledge for humanity's evolution, and the Sons of Shadow, who sought to monopolize power. This war, according to certain esoteric traditions, culminated in the use of energetic weapons capable of altering the Earth's very structure, a kind of nuclear war, but on a spiritual scale, and the epicenter was Atlantis. Yet another theory connects Atlantis to a greater cosmic cycle. According to this line of thought, Earth passes through vibrational ages, periods when collective consciousness rises or falls. Atlantis flourished during the so-called Golden Age when humans resonated in harmony with higher planes. But as that cycle ended, Earth's energy density began to increase. The vibration dropped, and civilizations that could not adapt vanished, not because they were destroyed, but because they vibrated at a frequency incompatible with the new world. They were disconnected from the current matrix, regardless of the cause: energetic collapse, war, or vibrational shift. The fall of Atlantis was a global trauma. Different cultures on different continents retain memories of this event. Hindus speak of sunken cities and God's weapons that destroyed skies and lands. Australian Aboriginals have legends of the Great Flood that erased the ancient world. Indigenous peoples of the Americas tell of entire continents swallowed by the water's dot. But what haunts me most is thinking about the survivors. Because yes, there are signs that not everyone perished. Some escaped before the destruction. They carried with them fragments of knowledge, seeds of ancient science, symbols, and codes. They spread across the planet. They became the founders of new civilizations. They were the ones who raised the pyramids, who traced the Nazca lines, who left the Moai on Easter Island, echoes of Atlantis, trying to keep alive the memory of what once was, and perhaps trying to warn us so we would never repeat the same mistake. But did we listen? Or are we, once again, repeating the arrogance that precedes the fall? When I look at the world today, the reckless exploitation of resources, the worship of power, the disconnection from the planet, I cannot help but wonder, are we rebuilding Atlantis, only to watch it fall again? Let's follow the tracks left by the survivors. Let's trace the steps of the guardians of wisdom, because the fall of Atlantis might have marked the end of one cycle, but it could also be the beginning of a new awakening. After the collapse, the survivors of Atlantis scattered. They fled in all directions, sailing in vessels propelled not just by the force of the wind, but by the urgency to preserve something sacred. These were not mere refugees. They were bearers of the last breath of a civilization that had touched the skies. They knew that if that wisdom died, humanity would have to start all over again. In the dark, they were called by many names. Some were seen as gods, others as masters, magicians, teachers. It didn't matter how they were received. What mattered was what they carried: symbols, knowledge, geometries, spiritual practices, healing techniques, sacred architecture, the mathematics of the stars. They became the guardians of the ancient fire. In Mesoamerica, mysterious figures emerged such as Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god who came from the east, taught humans the arts, science, and agriculture, and then departed, promising to return. In Peru, there is Viracocha, a figure of unusual appearance who civilized the Andean peoples and built cyclopean cities like Tiahuanaco. He too disappeared without a trace. Were they all echoes of the same being, or different bearers of the Atlantean legacy? And in Egypt, when the Atlanteans arrived there, they found a primitive but promising people. They taught them the foundations of civilization, They erected the first temples. They founded the lineage of the pharaohs. Some say that Thoth himself, the scribe of the gods, master of time and wisdom, was an Atlantean survivor. It is said he left encoded instructions in monuments like the Great Pyramid, which looks more like an energy machine than a tomb. These guardians spread a network of wisdom across the world. They created centers of knowledge, living libraries, such as the legendary Mystery School of Heliopolis, the mythical Library of Alexandria, the Tibetan monasteries, the secret archives of the Essenes, places where knowledge was protected, transmitted orally, hidden from profane eyes, and passed on only to those who were ready. But what exactly did they want to preserve? Memory, the pride of a lost empire? No, they wanted to preserve the seed, the frequency, because they knew that Atlantis, more than a place, was a state of consciousness, and that this consciousness could be reborn if it found fertile ground. That's why they also spread prophecies, ancient texts, stelae, symbols in caves, numerical codes. Many spoke of a future time when humanity would remember again, when the children of the earth would walk once more with the children of the stars, when the wisdom of the ancients would return with force, activating dormant centers in the heart and mind of every human being. And some say that time is now. Interestingly, modern scientists unknowingly have begun to confirm certain Atlantean intuitions. Sacred geometry is being studied again in bionic architecture. Healing through sound, once ridiculed, is now a subject of neuroscience research. Water is shown to be sensitive to intention. Crystals reveal their properties in technological applications. We are slowly rediscovering what they once knew. And what about the temples, the pyramids? They are aligned with constellations. They respect exact mathematical proportions. Many are built atop Earth's energy vortexes. They are more than stone. They are antennas, vibrational computers, and perhaps portals. Yes, the survivors of Atlantis knew what they were doing. They knew they could not prevent the collapse, but they could plant hope. And now it is up to us to follow their tracks, to listen to the echoes, to decipher the symbols. Because perhaps we are the next guardians, the ones who will reactivate the sleeping grid, and maybe, just maybe, the ones who will build the next Atlantis. Not out of stone, but out of consciousness. In the next block, we will explore the hidden codes left behind in monuments, myths, and maps, because Atlantis never completely disappeared. It was simply encoded. Have you ever felt that certain symbols are watching you? That some ancient structures were built not to be admired, but to be read, as if they spoke a forgotten language, a language not spoken, but felt. According to various traditions, the Atlanteans were masters of symbolic encoding. They understood that time corrupts words, but it respects symbols. And that is why they didn't leave books behind. They left signs. All around the world, there are structures that define not only logic but chronology. Pyramids aligned with the stars of Orion, monoliths that mark the solstices with surgical precision, stone circles that generate measurable electromagnetic fields, cities built with angles and proportions that reflect cosmic laws. All of this may be more than aesthetics. It may be a language, an Atlantean language. Think about the pyramids of Egypt, 3 great monuments aligned perfectly with the constellation of Orion at the point where it rose around 10,500 BC, exactly when many date the fall of Atlantis. Is this a coincidence or a time capsule? And the hieroglyphs? Some alternative scholars suggest that certain Egyptian symbols, like the Eye of Horus or the solar scarab, are direct remnants of the Atlantean writing system, combining energy, geometry, and vibration. Now look at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, at Teotihuacan in Mexico, at Stonehenge in England. All these sites seem to talk to one another. The measurements used, the astronomical alignments, the mathematical proportions, it's as if they were points in the same network, a global grid left behind by a planetary civilization. And it's not just architecture. There are maps, engravings, mandalas, alchemical diagrams, many present complex geometric structures, circles, triangles, spirals, and 6 or 8-pointed stars, symbols that appear in the Mayan codices, Indian yantras, Gothic cathedral stained glass, and Hermetic tablets. Why do the same patterns repeat across cultures separated by oceans and millennia? Because, perhaps, they share a common origin, the Atlantean code. This code wasn't just decorative. It was functional. It was a technology of information embedded in form. Every symbol, every proportion, every sound had a purpose: to open the mind, activate energy centers in the body, awaken dormant memories. It was like spiritual software embedded in stone, color, and sound. and those who knew how to read it had access. And here lies the most fascinating part. Many of these symbols have been incorporated into our collective unconscious. They appear in dreams, visions, and works of art. Artists, inventors, and visionaries often report seeing images they can't explain, yet that feel familiar. Are we receiving these messages? Did our ancestors encode the way back to Atlantis? Inside ourselves, today, researchers in the fields of consciousness, sacred geometry, archaeoastronomy, and symbolism are beginning to decipher these clues. And the more they decode, the more they realize that we are facing something far greater than a mere historical puzzle. We are facing a collective memory, an energetic password, and it is beginning to activate. In our next block, we will take this idea even further. What if Atlantis is not just in the past? What if it is coming back? What if Atlantis is not just a distant memory? What if, instead of sinking forever, it simply changed form, becoming invisible to the eyes, but not to the spirit? Some say it is returning, not in stone, but in frequency, not as a place, but as a state of consciousness. And each time we move closer to certain values, harmony, wisdom, connection with the cosmos, we take a step back toward Atlantis. But what would this return be? A civilization rising from the waters, the grand archaeological revelation? Or something subtler and more transformative? Some spiritual masters affirm that Atlantis never ceased to exist. It transmuted. It became a parallel reality, preserved in another dimension, accessible only to those who vibrate at the same frequency. A hidden realm in the subtle planes of consciousness, waiting for humanity to align once again with its essence. And the good news is, this alignment has already begun. Each time someone awakens to their purpose, accesses ancient knowledge, or feels an inexplicable calling toward the stars, Atlantis pulses. It vibrates through dreams, intuitions, synchronicities. The lost city is rebuilding itself within us, cell by cell, thought by thought. We are living at a planetary crossroads. A moment when science is approaching spirituality. Quantum physics confirms what the ancients already knew. Everything is energy, everything is interconnected. Time is not linear, space can be bent, thought shapes reality. And in this new paradigm, Atlantean wisdom fits perfectly. Atlantis does not need to be rebuilt with blocks of orichalcum. It needs to be reactivated within the collective consciousness, in the values we choose to cultivate, in how we treat the earth, each other, and ourselves. When humanity ceases to see separation, to exploit out of greed, to destroy out of fear, Atlantis will reveal itself, because it has always been here, hidden within another layer of reality. Many already feel this. They are the new Atlanteans, artists, healers, visionaries, conscious scientists, sensitive youth, spiritual seekers, people who have never met but share the same dreams, the same symbols, the same longing for a home they have never visited in this life, but somehow remember. Yes, Atlantis is returning, not as an empire of domination, but as a beacon of consciousness, not as a relic of past glory, but as a map for the future. And we are the builders of this new Atlantis, the eternal city that once fell from the sky and now rises from the heart. Epilogue. The last keynote that you've come this far. Take a deep breath, because perhaps, without even realizing it, you have done more than just watch or listen to a story. Perhaps you have felt something awaken, a whispered memory, a truth that has always been there, just waiting for the right moment to emerge. Atlantis is not merely a mystery to be solved. It is a mirror. It shows us what we once were, and what we still can become. A civilization that did not fall because it failed in its technology, but because it disconnected from its heart. And that is the final invitation, to reconnect. Reconnect with the planet. Reconnect with the frequency of wisdom. Reconnect with the pulse of an era longing to be reborn, not as a glorious past, but as a conscious future. Atlantis lies between the lines of time, on the edges of dreams, in the subtle vibrations of those who still believe that we can do differently. If this journey resonated with you, don't let that feeling fade. Comment below with the phrase, "Atlantis lives within me," and share your theory, your vision, your intuition. And if you want to continue exploring the mysteries that history dares not tell, subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, because this is just the beginning. There is so much more waiting for us, beneath the waters of forgetfulness, and above the clouds of consciousness. Atlantis is not lost. Atlantis is within you. See you on the next dive.